As we approach the holiday season, we're going to talk about a real positive subject, being blinded. But before we do, I just want to acknowledge how proud we ought to be of what God has done for us in this group here. Yesterday we had a service for Joanne Tanner on behalf of the family, and it was so well attended by those who were able to come from our own congregation, as well as many of their family, friends, and relatives. And it just makes a good image of this church here. And you get to know someone better than you ever realize when you go to a service. You learn things you never knew about the person that has passed away. And just we be able to meet together and have a meal was wonderful. And it's just wonderful that the group, what you all do here, and y'all all ought to be commended that you show love for each other. What do I say about Julie? Because she's so much in my head. When I was getting dressed this morning, I said, what's she going to think about my clothes? Because when I wear brown, it washes your face out, so you shouldn't wear it. But I hear there was a rumor that two of you spent 3 hours with her this weekend, so Carol could have a break. And so Stan and Deborah, that's really remarkable. Oh, I wasn't going to name your names, but it just shows love for the each other in this family, and it's special because the world doesn't have what we have here in Jesus Christ, and it's really remarkable. And so it's good to have Pam here. She was rear-ended coming out of the hospital, and she was at the stoplight, and that was Friday, right? Or Thursday night. Yeah. Oh, that's why she couldn't come to class, right? But and then Shirley took a fall, hurt her back, but she's here. So God is good to all of us, isn't he? And there's been some questions about Wednesday night class on New Year's Eve, so I think I'll just address it now because I'm going to be gone preaching in Washington next weekend. Christmas Eve, Wednesday class. We're going to have a gathering, and we're probably not going to study Revelation at all. But for those that want to come, please come. If you have family in town and you have things you have to do, we all understand. But we're not going to cancel, and if there's 5 of us, we'll just pray and sing songs and talk about how great God is, because it's a day of, and we might have visitors, we never know. So that'll be Wednesday at 6:30, our normal time, all right? So with that being said, Satan is really not a very popular subject, is it? When you talk about it, and it's rejected by the Western modern world entirely, the idea of a devil that's out there tempting people. But yet, we know that throughout Scripture, you can't avoid Satan and his reality. He's mentioned over 100 different times by name, Satan or the devil, or different references to him. And we see the book of Job is entirely devoted to Satan demanding of God to be able to test the man. And everything in that book is because Satan is tormenting him. We see Jesus on the earth. We see much in all the Gospels except John that he's tempted by Satan in 40 days in the wilderness. Remember, and he went without food, and Satan tempted him, not just with 3 things, but many other temptations. And so this is a real individual, and we shouldn't be surprised when we think, like, why doesn't everyone become part of God's family? Why doesn't everyone have an interest like you do to be part of his spiritual kingdom? Why are some people just so avoidant of anything to do with God and Jesus? And there's a lot of answers to that questions, but here is an answer given to us by God. And it's in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and it's going to be the basis from which we jump off on. In verse 3, Paul is talking to the Corinthian church. He says, even if our gospel is veiled, in other words, it's hidden from people, covered, it's veiled to those who are perishing. Well, why? In whose case the God of this world Now, you got to be comfortable with that. There aren't multiple gods, but Satan is referred to as the power of this world. He's temporarily got some type of authority control. It's limited, and we'll talk, Lord willing, later about what that is. But God calls him the God of this world. You have to be comfortable with that. Not that he is the supreme God. He's not equal to God, but he is in charge of many people's lives. But notice what he's done in verse 4. The God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving. Blinded them. You know, we've talked, which would you rather lose, your hearing or your eyesight? And to be blind is so debilitating, isn't it? Because you have to depend on someone totally for everything you do until you learn your way around the house and bump into a lot of things like, I'm not going to go that way anymore. But what would be worse than being physically blinded? It would be spiritually blinded. So what's so bad about that? Well, when we ask the question, it shows we don't understand the seriousness of it if we don't have that answer. He blinded the minds of the unbelieving so that, here it says, they might not see the light of the gospel and the glory of Christ, who is in the image of God. So when we look at this text that we just read, this is a spiritual reality that we wanted to just elaborate on, not just in this lesson, but in some future lessons ahead, because we are in a spiritual warfare. Every decision you make, and it's about what you eat, what you do, where you work, where you come to service, is a spiritual decision. And it might be made in the physical realm, and it might involve physical things, but it ripples and sends waves into the spiritual realm as well. It affects us and everyone around us. And we will demonstrate that over time. Because Satan, his whole intent is to destroy us spiritually. And he doesn't want any of us to have a relationship with God. He wants to think there's a spiritual maybe in the physical, and what you do in the physical doesn't matter in the spiritual. But no, they're all connected. And he's blinded so many people. There was a shooting again back east this weekend, right? Several dead and several critically ill. And the world has no answer for why that happens. Oh, they like to blame things like guns or this. But you know why people shoot people and someone's planning today the next shooting right now in their home somewhere? You know why that happens? Evil. There's evil. But when you're blinded by Satan, you can't even consider the concept that people have evil in their life. And we'll demonstrate that in our lesson this morning. Because Satan has blinded them. And they can't understand there is good and there is bad. There is moral and the immorality. And they do that because they want to have license to do whatever they choose. So when we look at this and we break this text down, people want to just make Satan this, they want to just make him a caricature that you don't have to take very seriously, which is the worst thing we could do. Because he's a real individual. And notice he's trivialized, but he's throughout the Bible. He's called the tempter. He's called the evil one. He's called the great accuser, the adversary, the great dragon, the serpent, Beelzebub. And to deny the presence of Satan is to our own demise spiritually. And we'll demonstrate that. And the God of this world has blinded the world to that. And so when we look at this, spiritual blindness, when we're going to define it, it's the inability to see or understand the truth of God in Jesus Christ. It's the inability. They can't see it. The truth of who God is and who Jesus is and his truth and his glory. And you say, well, why can't they see it? Well, because they've been blinded, right? And Satan has done that. It says the God of this world has blinded them so they cannot believe. They cannot see. So we can talk about it. This happens due to continual sin. When we sin the same sin or a life of sin over and over, it hardens our heart and it blinds us to God and his truths. It's due to deception because Satan is the father of lies. Everything he says is a lie. And all he does is trying to deceive people. Take this, it's good for you, when actually it'll kill you. Oh, don't do this because it's bad for you, and it's actually that which will save you. And when you buy into his deception, after a while you become blinded. And it's due to his influence. And I don't know how he does it, but it says the God of this world has blinded people, right? He directly somehow influences their life, and we'll try to peel that back later. But it's because of what his effort on this earth. And it results in a distorted understanding of reality. I want you to say that. People that are blinded spiritually do not see reality normally. You're like, what makes them think that way? It's because it's all distorted. It's messed up. They don't think straight because they've been blinded by Satan. And so their reality is warped, the way they see the world. And you wonder, and you look at our Western culture, like, why do people do these things? Why do they claim these things? Why are people having gender issues? It's Satan. He's warped their thinking. And it creates a separation from God. So any attempt to see a reality without God's light shining on the issue, right? It will result in truth appears to be false, and that which is false will appear to be true. And darkness appears normal to them. And Christ appears as either insignificant or actually dangerous. We need to get rid of religion altogether. And that's the mantra of a lot of people today. Christianity is the problem. And if we just got rid of religion altogether, we'd be a happier world. That is spiritual blindness. And so when we talk about it, we want to look at just 3 points. The society, due to their blindness, is trying to kill God altogether, just get rid of him. And when you kill God, you're actually killing Satan. And that's important to note. And then we'll look at the idea that their substitute is this commitment to what we call materialism, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll look at the result of the world we live in when you've killed God and you have been blinded by Satan. We'll look at some of the results. But let's look at the idea of attempting to kill God. Now, can you kill God? Obviously, no. But throughout history, the so-called philosophically elite and the big thinkers and all that, they have come to the conclusion that faith is just a weakness, there is no God, and they've tried to rid society of God altogether. And one person that wrote about it would be Friedrich Nietzsche, and he makes a comment in this book. And he's talking about what society's done. It's not so much what he believes, but he says the phrase kill God, it's in his book where it says God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. Now, I would suggest in our society, largely, that's the attitude of a lot of people. He does not exist. Do you remember anyone that Time magazine, and they asked the question, is God dead? Actually, they're promoting the idea, God's dead. Christianity's declining. Attendance in worship is declining. Now that's changed. It's actually growing right now because people see the world has nothing to offer, so they're looking back to God. But that's been the attitude all along. Just get rid of God. And that's the Marxist attitude, because the Marxist attitude views religion as an opium on the people. It just sedates them and confuses them. And it's a tool used to oppress people and needs to be abolished altogether. That's their attitude, the Marxist attitude. And so we have the new atheism, people like Hitchens and Dawkins, and they portray religion as a harmful delusion, like we're the one that's blinded. So that which is truth becomes a lie, and that which is darkness also becomes light in this blinded world in which they live. Now, when we look at this, we have to realize there's a problem, of course, because as Wattenberg, who wrote or talked on this think tank from PBS, he says, when Nietzsche pronounced that God is dead, the devil was mortally wounded as well. You say, what do you mean? Well, let's expand on that. He says, it is argued that Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, convinced many that sin is only a mental illness. Today, it'd say it would be a product of your childhood upbringing. dysfunctional families. And a lot of that's true. But he convinced them it's just a mental illness, and he reduced Satan to just a figment of our imagination. So what he's saying is, if there's no God, well, then you can't have a Satan either, right? Because they're the opposite of each other. And to accept God is, you have to accept the presence of evil, and the author of that evil is Satan. So to get rid of God, you have to get rid of Satan and evil. And so no one ever sins. They just make poor mistakes, generally because of mental illness or poor upbringing. And that's why there's such a hesitancy, and downright, they won't call anything evil today, people. So no, they just had a bad upbringing. And so to put them in jail is morally wrong, so we just need to let them back out on the street and get them some rehab, and so they can have a better life. It's not their fault. That's what's driving so much of people's thinking today that are in charge of these type of systems. And so to kill God is also to kill Satan. And so what the substitute is very clear, because when you don't believe in God, of course you're not going to believe in Satan then. You got to have something to believe in. I'm mindful of what we've been studying in Revelation. Remember the Laodicean church this last Wednesday? A wealthy town. It's kind of sort of like America, a wealthy nation. And they thought they were rich, and they thought they were all together. And he says, no, you say I'm rich and I need nothing. When Jesus said, not realizing you are wretched and you're pitiful and poor and blind. Because they can't see their own condition. Well, that's what has happened to much of America. And so materialism is a worldview. It's not being materialistic. It comes out of that. In other words, having lots of stuff. But it's an attitude or a worldview that exchanges the account of God creating, the notion that God created everything. Since there is no God, of course, he didn't create it. We have to come up with a way that we got here. So everything happened by science and nature and just by chance. There's a material or natural explanation for everything that's happened in this world. And you can't invoke God because he doesn't exist. So it's just a natural cause and effect. And so everything, including life, your mind, meaning, morality, it can be explained without God in the picture at all, or any kind of spirituality. Now, here's a long quote. I've used it before, but I think it's so profound. It's one of from Professor Richard Lewitton, and he has been a hallmark in his life of pushing not just evolution, but anti-God. And I think this long quote will help state better than I ever could what materialism is all about. All right? And how absurd it is. So we're going to read this. So bear with me, okay? He wrote, this is a professor, renowned person when it comes to evolution, this type of thinking. Our willingness to accept scientific claims, i.e. life started in a puddle, there was a big bang, and everything came from a premortal egg that all matter was compressed into it. It was the size of this, and all the universe came out of it. Our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense, he acknowledges that, is the key to understanding the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, its claims. Now, what's he acknowledging? Some of the things we are suggesting to be the cause for how we got here are absurd. That's what he says. Well, we accept them because we don't want to go supernatural. In spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life. Isn't that what government and the science is saying? Just listen to us, we'll have a better life, better health, you'll live forever. And it just gets what? Worse. With shooting and morality and more disease, life expectancy is going down. In spite of the tolerance of the scientific community to unsubstantiated just so stories. In other words, they make all these claims and create stories to back them up, and they've never been proven. Because we have a prior commitment to, here it is, materialism. This worldview that everything came from science or nature, and it's all cause and effect, and there's nothing spiritual about it. And he goes on. This is the next paragraph. It's not that the methods and institutions of science compel us to accept a material explanation. Isn't that interesting? He's not saying we looked at all the evidence and we were compelled to take this point of view. That's not it. It's not about science. But on the other contrary, we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts to produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive. In other words, we've already have this presupposition, there is no God, it has to be material, so we have to invent ways to make it possible. Now notice this, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. So have you ever looked at evolution and asked questions like, how did this all happen? And you're mystified. He's acknowledging that it's because you're uninitiated. You're not part of our religious cult. Because it is a cult called science. Now, pseudoscience is what it is. And even though you don't understand it, now here is the big kicker line. Moreover, materialism is absolute. Why? Because we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. You know what he means by that? We can't allow just the notion that there's a divine being that had anything to do with creating this world, much less controlling it now. We're so absolutely against that. We'll come up with this theory. We can't substantiate it. There's no proof for it, but we're accepting it because we can't let that in because that'll make us change our life. Now, this is a scientist saying this. Now, he's not done. The eminent Kant scholar, Louis Beck, used to say that anyone who could believe in God could believe in anything. See, they think we're a bunch of fools. Our faith is blind. It's not based on any evidence. And so if you can get someone to believe in God, you get them to believe in the tooth fairy and Santa Claus and all that. All right? But it's interesting. It's actually the opposite. He's just admitted they believe in something without any evidence. To appeal to an omnipotent deity allow that any moment the regularities of nature may be ruptured and that miracles may happen. Yes, that's true. And they don't want to go there because they don't want to be accountable to that God. That's materialism, and it dominates politics. It dominates all our college and universities, the institutions of higher learning. And when you send your kids to school, they're getting indoctrinated with this, and we wonder why we lose them. We wonder why kids are so disgruntled and depressed, and there are so many shootings on campus and things like that. It's because they've been taught that nothing matters. And it creates a nihilistic attitude. Nihilist means that there's no meaning to life. And so just do whatever you want. If you want to kill yourself, so what? Now, they're blinded. And the resulting blindness is so serious. And we could elaborate on all this, but I don't want to overwhelm you with just all the evidence that we could present. But the result is the God of this world has taken people that don't want to follow God. They just refuse to, and he's blinded them, leading to some false nonsense that they can accept as a substitute. He's blinded them so they will not see the light of the gospel or the glory of Christ, who's in the image of God. Isn't that sad? And you wonder why. You're sometimes fighting a battle that you just can't win. It was because Satan has won their hearts. Now, I'm not saying they can't be won back, but this is our battle we're in. And so when we look at some of the results of this blindness, the world has been blinded to the spiritual realm. And we're going to talk about that more in detail later. But the real realm is the spiritual realm. And you can't see it, but it's everything. It's where God exists, the angels exist, that's where Christ is. And there's a subset of the spiritual realm called the physical realm, where we have our universe. And even a smaller part is just the earth. It exists in this larger realm called the spiritual realm. And that's where God exists. And when you refuse to accept there's a God, you refuse to accept the spiritual realm. So you're blind to it. There is no spirituality. And so because of that, you have to turn to this materialism or naturalism. Everything has a natural cause or a scientific explanation. So because of that, when you see crime, when you see social injustice, greed or war or any type of racism or cruelty, it's not because people are evil. It's not because they've sinned. It's not because they've sold their soul to the devil, because the devil doesn't exist. It's because they have a physical cause for that. And we need to treat the cause and we can save society. How's that worked out? Then let's go on when we talk about that. So calling someone evil, in their view, and you hear this, I'll give you some quotes later, or immoral is a value judgment, and you're just trying to control them by making them feel guilty. Because there is no sin, because there is no truth, absolute truth, and there's no absolute morality. And so you're evil if you call someone evil. Oh, isn't that interesting? That's where they contradict themselves, because they're calling us evil or immoral or unloving. That's a value judgment, isn't it? So they want it both ways. They don't want you ever speaking out against evil or immorality or what's wrong, because then that would make them feel guilty. But so they end up do the same to you. And we look at it. So medical terms are invented often to explain away evil. A dysfunctional family. I don't want to minimize the role of a healthy family plays on raising a healthy child. And I know there are dysfunctional families that create children that have all sorts of problems. But the solution to those children, when they become adults, to become a fully functioning adult, is Jesus Christ and God our Father. It's not drugs. It's not some type of psychoanalysis or reprogramming. It's them being unblinded, come to the knowledge of the truth that'll set them free. But that's not what happens. We have to just come up with these terms, Everything's a mental illness now. Now, again, there's mental illness in my family, in Ann's family, and I understand there's true physical, mental illness that exists in people's lives. They can't help themselves. But everything now becomes a mental illness when you just choose to do something repetitively, because your heart's been hardened and you've been blinded by Satan. Or it's childhood issues. And I get it. All of us had child issues, but how many of you become mass murderers because of it? It doesn't. And yeah, we get addicted to drugs. A lot of you have. And you've told me your story. And some of you have messed your brain up with it. But you're sitting here because Jesus shed light in your life and you were no longer blinded by the godless world and you came to your senses. Now, do you still have to suffer the consequence of your actions? Yes. But you're no longer held captive by Satan. And so I don't care how you were raised. There's always a way out. And the way out is the truth of Jesus Christ. So we look at it. We have social, personal problems that never are a spiritual issue. And that's when they look for all the reasons why we have all these problems. They'll have more programs they'll throw at it and more money. But the real basic primary issue is a spiritual problem. When God is void and doesn't exist in your life's going to be a mess. Because you're ignoring the reality of what really exists. You are a spiritual being living in a physical body, in a spiritual realm, and everything you decide to do has spiritual implications. I've learned that so many times the hard way. You think, well, just telling a lie is not going to, it's not going to cause a problem. But a lie is like a wave. It just, a ripple in a pond. You throw a rock in it, right? And it ripples and affects the next person next to you and it affects the next person to them. And it's always going to come back to you, doesn't it? Like, oh man, I shouldn't have told that lie because now I got in trouble. Everything we do it has a spiritual implication. And likewise, when I do something positive and say something nice or bless someone, that's why I had to share what all of you have been doing by seeing Julie. Because when you hear those stories and you hear about what they did, like it builds you up rather than tears you down. It makes you feel good about one another. It makes you feel good about our lives. It makes you feel good about doing it yourself, right? So I imagine after that announcement, everyone's going to be seeing Julie and they're going to have to put bars on the door. Wouldn't that be a great problem? And that's the solution. They think it though it's never a spiritual issue. We can figure it out and fix it on our own. And folks, if that's been you, if I just try harder, I can stop this sin. If I just try harder, I won't be so angry. If I just try harder, you can't try hard enough. Satan is the one that caused the broken world in which we live in. And trying harder is never the solution. The only solution is God who tried harder by letting his son free us from it. By his death on the cross and us having a renewed relationship with him so we can have the Spirit lead us and give us the power that we don't have to overcome evil. So you want to make a real change in your life, it's getting back to God and accepting the spiritual reality that exists. So let's bring this to a conclusion. Nothing's changed. Jesus said this in his day. The heart of this people will become dull. They just can't hear anymore. He's talking about the religious leaders, the Jewish people. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. He's saying they're spiritually blind. Satan has done it. Otherwise, they would see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart and return, and I would heal them. That's all God wants to do is heal our broken lives. That's all he wants to do. But they refused him because Satan had blinded their eyes. It was true in the Old Testament. We could read multiple passages. I'll just share one, Zechariah. They refused to pay attention. Notice that they refused to. And turned a stubborn shoulder and stopped their ears. You ever done that like a little child? Put fingers in the ear and just plug them. I'm not going to listen because they refused to hear. They blinded. Their eyes were blinded. The world has no solution to the problems of this world today. It has no solutions. And they're going to keep trying. They'll pass new laws, throw more money, put more pressure on you. But there's no solution. It just gets worse, doesn't it? The only solution, again, I'm just being repetitive, is Jesus Christ. And when we turn back to him, we're going to find the paradise, ultimately in heaven, but even a better life on this earth. Andrew Delbonico writes this: a gulf has opened up in our culture between the visibility of evil and the intellectual resources available for coping with it. Okay, what do you mean this gulf? Well, here's what he says. The repertoire of evil has never been richer. In other words, we see it all the time. I mean, how many stories can I give you about evil besides this shooting? It was Charlie Kirk before that. Every night in Portland, there's a shooting or a car theft or a stealing. I mean, it's all around us. Where you used to leave your car unlocked, the keys in it, and your house unlocked, and people would even leave, I remember in my day, the car running and go into the store, and the car would still be there. And it'd be running unless you ran out of gas. All right. But now our response is, it's never been so weak. We have no language for connecting our inner lives with the horrors that pass before our eyes in the world. Well, why? Why does he say, what's the problem? My driving motive in writing this book, which he wrote, has been that the conviction that if evil, with all its insidious complexity, which Augustine attributed, escapes the reach of our imagination, he's saying if we just don't allow evil to even exist in our mind as a reality, then evil, will have dominion over all of us. Do you understand that? When you ignore the enemy, he has total power over you. Because then you cannot engage in the fight. You've already lost the war. And that's America. Largely. Not all of it. It's the Western world. That our intellectualism, we deny the spiritual reality, what's going on. And so it has total control over them. Because they're not even engaged in the war. And that's what we're dealing with. So that's our lesson. We've been blinded. Now we can choose no longer to be blinded again. We're going to take a stand with Jesus Christ, put on the full armor of God, and we're going to make a difference in our own lives and in the life around us. Jesus said this. John said of Jesus, he is the true light. He gives light to everyone. In Ephesians, Paul prays this prayer, and I ask you to pray it as well. You take it home and just put your own name. Lord, I pray that the eyes of my heart might be enlightened so that I can know. What is the hope of your calling? What the riches of glory of my inheritance in the saints? And what is the surpassing greatness of your power towards me, since I believe? Pray that prayer, and God will open your eyes. Satan blinds by denial, by deceit, by continual temptation and sin. But when the devil is denied, then we're rendered powerless to engage in the battle. But when we have our eyes open, we know who to fight. That'll be a lesson. We'll know how to fight. That'll be another lesson. And we'll know about our victory because it's already won. If you're struggling with the idea of a personal deity or entity called Satan, I'll just offer you 4 points that has already been promoted or suggested. First of all, you're being simplistic. You got a simplistic view of the world. If you don't understand there's a God and there's also a Satan. You're culturally narrow because all the world largely believes that there is a God and there is a Satan. Are they so ignorant or we're the only ones enlightened? And if you believe in God, it's inconsistent not to believe in Satan. You have to believe in both. If you believe in one, you have to believe in the other because he presents his whole life as a battle against the evil one, which he has overcome already. And you're not going to be able to understand if you don't accept Satan, the darkness which is in your own heart, much less be able to do something about it and defeat it. Now, there's 2 extremes when it comes to Satan and evil and darkness. You can not believe it at all, and then you're already overpowered by it. Or you can surrender and give Satan too much power in your life. Like, he's in charge of everything, I'm helpless. No, that's equally wrong. Again, the solution is Jesus Christ. Amen. And so we're going to sing this song. Let him have his way with you. Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he might exalt you. So let's sing this song. If we can help you anyway and walk your spiritual walk as a Christian, we're here to help you. Let's stand and sing together.
Would you live for Jesus and be always pure and good? Would you walk with him within the narrow